So hello and welcome everyone to this East West Railway Company online session with your neighboring parishes and councillors within the Bedford, the southern part of Bedford and Bedford town. My name is Jordi Vescoiche and I'm one of the engagement managers here at Idway Arco. We're pleased that you can join us this evening to this second meeting following the one that we held back on the first week of April, on the first week of consultation. As advised on the invitation, the session today is an opportunity for you to raise any questions, outstanding questions that you or your residents might have on our proposals now that you've had a chance to engage with the documents and that residents have been in touch with you and your constituents. Basically, we just want to ensure that we've tackled all your key questions before you can submit a response to the consultation. Ahead of today's session, we ask you to let us know if there were any questions or issues that you wanted us to address during the meeting. Thank you very much to those of you who've written to us. If you haven't, no worries, no problem. There will be time during the Q&A. We've allocated plenty of time for it to cover any issues that have not been raised in advance, so no problem at all. To let you know that we're holding similar sessions with all the parishes and councillors within the consultation zone between Oxford and Cambridge throughout this week. And as I was briefly touching on before, in terms of structure, so we'll start with a presentation that will run for around half an hour, excuse me, in which we are basically going to recap on the options that we're consulting on in your area, as well as tackle some of the key questions that we have been receiving through like correspondence from you, from live chats, public webinars, and then we're going to move on to a long Q&A. We've allocated 50 minutes for it before we wrap up with some next steps. So overall, the session should last for around 90 minutes. Said that, I'd like you to introduce it to the rest of the team that is joining me tonight. We have our Strategy and Sponsorship Director, Will Gallagher, who will be leading on the presentation in a second. When I stop talking, we also have our Development Manager for the Marston Bay line, Stephen Barker. We also have our Head of Environmental Impact, Michael Shanks, and our Head of Program Consents, Kirsty Young, as well as a couple of colleagues from ACOM and Barley who are supporting us holding the session with note-taking and monitoring the chat. Before we start the presentation, very briefly, let me run you through some housekeeping and kind of etiquette note. I'm sure that like by now, kind of most of you are very familiar with this platform, but just as a reminder, you'll find in the bar below your screen different features, including like the buttons to mute and unmute yourself, share your camera, and open the chat window or check the list of participants. We'd also be grateful if you could rename yourself to display your full name and your Zoom account doesn't show your actual name already, although I think that everyone that's in this call has their actual name so far. And we're also going to ask you to keep yourself muted at all times unless you're given the floor during the Q&A, just to avoid kind of like sort of those unpleasant echoes. In terms of the questions, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, I mean, we hope to address most of yours during the presentation, but if you do have one, please raise it through the chat bar, and then we're going to pick it up in the Q&A. And once that we hit the Q&A part of the session, we're going to open the floor, and you can sort of raise any questions by indicating so by pressing the raise your hand button, and which you can find at the bottom right on the participants list, and we'll be more than happy to hand over to you to ask your question. And then as a final point, to flag that the session tonight is being recorded, and that the recording together with the slides that we're going to be presenting are going to be available on our website on the consultation site next week. And on that note, before I just hand it over to Will very quickly, if Cassie, we can have the slides, so basically we can show people present who have we invited to the session tonight, just so they are aware. But basically it's all the parishes and all the in the south of Bedford, as well as all the ward councillors.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Geordie. Just sharing that now. Hope everyone can see that okay.
Yes, so if we can, I think it's like 3 or 4 slides in, and we can then quickly see the map, and I'll hand it over to Will to start the presentation. Yes, this is the list of all the parishes that we've invited today, and on the next slide we have all the words which you should recognize. And on that note, I will then hand it over to Will to start the presentation.
Thanks very much, Geordie. So we'll recap very quickly on what we're consulting on. I know many of you on the call are very well familiar with that, so we won't spend too long on that. Look at the key themes and questions that, as Geordie said, have been coming up in terms of correspondence, emails, previous events. A little bit of time talking about how to get your communities involved. Again, you know, I know a lot of you are aware of that content, and then we can spend most of the session, you know, for me, particularly here, this is, you know, I do want to make sure we devote, you know, a good amount of time to Q&A and have a constructive discussion. So if we move on to the next slide, you're obviously aware that non-statutory public consultation is underway through to the 9th of June. On to the next slide, that we're consulting on a full range of options. You know, I guess today the ones that are most pertinent are both Bletchley and the Marston Vale line, and Bedford, you know, with a particular focus in the area of Bedford. We do think it is important that in addition to the infrastructure development, we do get people's feedback and views on the type of railway they want and the customer experience they want to have, because the railway, whilst it, you know, is going to cause during construction and you know, for the infrastructure that we develop, some you know, disruption for people, we do want to make sure that in terms of the service that we're offering, we are offering the kind of service that people want and that meet their expectations. As we move on to the next slide, what you can see here is the full consultation zone, just so you're aware of all the people who have been consulted, and every household within that zone will have received a summary document through the post. And, you know, we've been doing everything we can to promote the consultation. We've got a growing number of consultation responses, very large number of letters, emails, phone calls. So people are very engaged, which we're very grateful for, and wanting to make sure that we get good responses so we can take into account people's feedback as we develop the scheme. As we move on to the next slide, just a very sort of quick conversation about customer experience and railway operations, where we do want people's feedback, not just at the station or on board the train in isolation, but really thinking about the end-to-end journey that customers have, you know, all the way from first thinking about their journey to returning home. And when we look at that in a bit more sort of detail and the key areas that we want to focus on, if we flick onto the next slide, what you can see there is, you know, hearing more detail on the type of train service people want, the kind of experience they want at stations, the actual onboard experience itself, as well as interactions with our team, and that all important customer information as well. So trying to get people's feedback on those key areas, because we know from our research, they do make such a difference to the kind of experience people have when using the railway. As we move on, we're now going to look at the areas of the infrastructure interventions that we're going to talk about. You'll have seen this slide before in terms of the full range of infrastructure interventions we're considering to take us from Oxford to Cambridge, drawing particular attention to the green and the red box in the middle of your screen, because those are where we're going to focus our time today. If we do then move on to zoom into that green box a little bit, looking at Bletchley and the Marston Vale line. In this area, we will be looking at improvements to the Bletchley station, some additional track at Fenny Stratford. On the Marston Vale line, a series of interventions in terms of the level crossings, in terms of the future stations where the services will call and the calling pattern there, and also the approach that we're taking to construction. It isn't possible to run a really reliable, fast and frequent Oxford-Cambridge service without addressing the work that is necessary on this line, and we're bringing forward a number of sort of proposals and high-level concepts here for what we might do. If we move on to the next slide, and what we're looking at, as we've said, primarily here, in addition to the work on the level crossings, are two station concepts. The first is that we retain the existing hourly stopping service on the Marston Vale line, and then introduce a new East-West rail service calling at Woburn Sands and Ridgemont, and they would call there at 4 times an hour. The second concept is that actually, rather than stopping at the existing stations, we merge the stations together to create 5 new stations, all of which would benefit from at least 2 EWR services an hour, and then Woburn Sands and Ridgemont would have 4. What that approach means is that more communities have access to the more frequent and faster services direct to more locations that East West Rail offers. So we're open-minded as to which of those two concepts that people are interested in. We're hearing a range of views on that, actually, in terms of what people prefer, and some people suggesting alternatives for us to consider as well. So those are things that we're taking into account, but just so you're aware of the two concepts that we're developing. As we move on to the next slide, this then is the sort of section C in Bedford, an area I'm sure you'll be familiar with. And as we look at those proposals onto the next slide, there are a series of sort of proposals as we first of all come in on on the Marston Vale line and the appropriate alignment for sort of realigning the Marston Vale line and relocating Bedford St John's station, and a couple of options there, either just southwest of the current station or moving it closer to the hospital. We then take a new alignment through to Bedford Station and relocating Bedford Station in the area sort of where near where it currently is, and we've indicated a zone there, but there are a number of options that we're considering for precisely where the station will go and how that will work, and then continuing the additional track through the Bromham Road Bridge and towards sort of Clapham, where we head off to the east to pick up the new alignment heading towards Cambridge. And obviously we're aware that those proposals do have implications for the local community in the area, particularly the 6 tracking of the Midland Main Line, and the fact that it does cause the need for demolitions north of the Bromham Road Bridge in the Poets area, and we are very mindful of that, and no doubt that will be something we talk about in the session later on. But really just wanted to again just provide a quick summary of those proposals. As we move on to the next slide, what we wanted to do now was, having done that run through of the proposals, just to make sure everybody was reminded of those, if not aware already, sort of picking up some of the key questions that are coming up frequently and turning to some of our experts to answer those. So as we move on to the next section, in terms of the route options and the route alignment options, I think I'm handing over to Stephen to pick up those questions.
Thanks, Will. Yes, we'll start off with me, and I'll pass on to other experts as required as we move forward. Can we have the next slide, please? So the first question that we're talking about tonight is there on the screen. I'll read it out. Bearing in mind the roads around the station are gridlocked at busy times and you're expecting more passengers, how do you plan to ensure the general Bedford traffic isn't detrimentally impacted more than it already is by the increased volume of traffic? Well, there's a few things to say really about that. I mean, first of all, by redeveloping the station site in Bedford, one of the things we're trying to do is provide a new facility for the town, which will hopefully contribute to the regeneration of the area immediately around the station in a positive way. Of course, we fully recognise the challenges of getting to and from the station and some of the existing challenges around car traffic in particular. We are looking quite closely at how we provide access to the station by lots of different means. In particular, looking at emerging and future trends in transport, and of course, we'll be undertaking detailed traffic modelling at an appropriate stage in the process as well to understand what other interventions might be needed to ensure that the traffic flow is dealt with properly and appropriately. But the key thing really is also, as I say, focusing on how people make those journeys to and from the station, and where possible, promoting sustainable travel options, so making it easier and more convenient for people to walk or cycle to the station, or where appropriate, use other methods of public transport. So on the next one, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Michael, who will answer that one.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So the next question relates to biodiversity. I'll read out the question, then provide some response to that. So aware that in deciding on Route Corridor E, one of the considerations was that it offers more opportunities for biodiversity net gain. Can you provide specific examples of how and where Route Corridor E enables biodiversity net gain, and where are these opportunities and what form do they take? So thank you for the question. It is an important question. And it's important because, you know, East West Rail is absolutely committed to biodiversity net gain. We've stated that in our consultation information, which I'm sure you've seen. And we really want to build on the commitment of 10% biodiversity net gain that was made in relation to the part of East West Rail between Bicester and Bletchley, and in line with developing government policy in the area and legislation in the area. Now, really, our approach to this point, and a key element of our approach to the environment generally actually, is about avoidance. We're prioritising avoiding high value and priority habitats, such as those with national, international and international statutory designations. And by that I mean things such as ancient woodland, triple SIs or sites of special scientific interest, as well as other important areas, so those areas which are seen as priority habitats, for example. And as we go forward, we'll look at how we can look to enhance existing habitats. We'll also look at opportunities to create new habitats where those opportunities exist. And looking specifically at route option E, in the third route option announcement report, we did highlight that routes via Cambourne appear to offer the fewest problematic areas with potential direct impacts on irreplaceable or sensitive features. And again, by that we mean things such as ancient woodland, sites of special scientific interest, registered parks and gardens, priority habitat areas, and so on. And that consideration was informed by a number of factors. But for example, we looked at the density of environmental features that we wish to avoid in the route option areas, and the likely feasibility of potential alignments that could avoid those environmental features. In addition, gave some thought to how achievable it was to mitigate the impacts associated with those particular areas if they were indeed impacted. The route via Cambourne, we believe, does provide good opportunities to achieve biodiversity net gain. And, you know, we continue to talk to a variety of stakeholders to understand those in a bit more detail. But some areas in particular, perhaps, that we're aware of and interested in exploring further are opportunity areas around great ooze river valley, particularly around the wetlands, then what we can do in terms of enhancing creation in terms of wetlands. Other opportunity areas are things like the West Cambridge woodlands, so the Hundreds Project Living Landscape. Again, there's some opportunities there around woodland that we're keen to engage with and understand how we can work with organisations to enhance those projects. And similarly, I understand that there's work around the Bedford Northern fringes and looking to create a linear network of green space. And again, it's an area that I think there's opportunity for us to work with yourselves, other stakeholders, to look for opportunities in those areas. In terms of specific steps that we can take along the route corridor to support our commitment to net gain, to some extent that depends on the selected route alignment option and the assessments that we take associated with that particular alignment. But I think it's really important to note that it will be influenced and to a large extent dependent on discussion with stakeholders, such as yourself, but also others like Wildlife Trust, for example, to identify what potential opportunities are close to a selected alignment in terms of the ability to create and enhance habitats to support biodiversity net gain. And we'll continue those discussions and that engagement over the next few months and years. And I expect to be able to provide some more information in terms of what we're looking at more specifically in the next consultation exercise. I hope that was helpful. So that's covered off what I was intending to talk to in relation to that. And I hand over to, I can't remember who it is now, for the next question, actually.
Yeah, if we could move on to the next slide, and I think like it's Stephen again with the design proposal, if I'm not mistaken. We can move on to the next one, please. Yes.
Yeah, so it's back to me again. Yeah, so questions on design proposals. Have there been any developments relevant to either the location or design of either of the two Bedford stations since the consultation document was published, or of other parts of the route between Bletchley and Cambridge? So the short answer is obviously design work is ongoing on all of the scheme. That design work will continue during the coming year, for the rest of the year, as we lead up to the next round of consultation. But there have been no changes of any significance to any of the proposals that are put forward in the consultation document at this stage. We are just continuing to work up those options as they are presented in the consultation document. Moving on to the next one, in 2010, Network Rail produced plans for a similar rebuild of Bedford Station that didn't require property demolitions, demolitions of non-railway property. Why are you not working on a similar basis? So on this one, the proposals put forward by Network Rail in 2010 were looking to achieve slightly different things to what we're now looking at. Those proposals didn't take into account East-West Rail. They didn't provide the capacity required for East-West Rail to come along into Bedford. We are now looking at adding additional platforms to the station, up to 3 platforms on the east side of the current station. And those platforms sit on the site of the current station building and station facilities. So consequently, we need to relocate those to a different location. So essentially what I'm saying here is the scheme that the East-West Rail are now promoting is actually quite different to the Network Rail one, because we are providing that additional capacity that wasn't included in the 2010 scheme. Okay, can we move on? And I believe I'm handing over to Kirsty to answer this one.
That's me. Thanks, Stephen. Hi, I'm Kirsty Young. I'm head of programme consents in East West Rail, and I'm the lead for the EWR land team. There, as Will was saying at the beginning, obviously there's a number of key property impacts, particularly around about the sort of Bedford area. But I'll first of all, there's some specific Q&As that have come in, which I'll respond to in a minute. But first of all, this is just a little bit of a recap and a scene setting more generally in terms of landowner engagement. But I will come on to the more specific issues around about Bedford as well in a minute. But there may also be others on the call that have general questions around about property impacts across the areas. So we have been engaging with landowners at this early stage, whether those are sort of alignment options or whether it's more sort of search areas round about the proposals between sort of Oxford and Bedford. We've been sort of seeking to make contact with those landowners and engage with them and start early discussions really with them about actually, what our proposals may mean, and to sort of continue that discussions as we go through the development consent order process and future consultations and into the examination side. We do have a lands team that are available to talk to people, and we've been sort of having virtual meetings with landowners to sort of talk through the information and to really point them in particular to the information that's most relevant to them and to help them understand the consultation. And I'm seeing a message here about saying that oh no, okay, I'm coming through clearly. It's probably the mic, at least it's working at the moment. Probably means you might hear the kids in a minute when they come crashing through, but hopefully not. We are also engaging with the wider community, sort of and particularly we'll sort of come on to Bedford in a minute as well, because I think really with the residents there, a number of them are potentially not landowners; they're potentially maybe short-term renters as well. So it's trying to engage there, and we are consulting on a discretionary purchase scheme alongside the consultation that we've got at the moment, which is a need to sell scheme. Which is really looking, recognising the fact that by publishing proposals, we potentially could have an impact upon people that are seeking to sell their property at the moment, with some uncertainty around about that property, and that may well have an effect on them. So we're consulting on a scheme just now, and we're encouraging people to feed their views into us, basically, as to whether that meets the issues that they have, or whether there's anything they want to alert us to as well. There is statutory provisions, they kick in quite a lot sort of further down the line in terms of the DCO. So the discretionary purchase scheme that we're putting forward aims to sort of bring forward that sort of mitigation for people if they're having this issue, and also extends it wider to not just being property that may be acquired by within the red line boundary, if you like. It may also be property that is adjacent to the scheme that may be affected. And we have information on our website. If you move on to the next slide, I think there were some quite specific questions that come in, sort of particularly, really, I think for some of these questions, really, it's particularly been round about the Bedford area. The first question really is round about residents. I think looking at the data that we have information on the registered land interests, particularly in the areas within the search area around about Bedford Station. There's a number of residential properties there on Ashburnham Road, and then also in the Poets area north of Bromham Road. A number of streets there that have residential properties that maybe have been identified for demolition, or maybe required in the future, depending upon structural and further works that may need to be done. So we have written to those registered land interests. If you look at the data, it probably suggests that actually a number of the registered land interests don't have the same address as the land description, and I think the feedback from councillors and others in the area as well is there's potentially a lot of short-term renters. That in our letters to the landowners, we have obviously said to the landowners, listen, we'll be happy to speak to your tenants, but it is a kind of pull from them if they want the tenants want to get in touch with us. We are. The other issue that was being raised by the councillors in both those areas really is about potentially is language a barrier to people. There may be multiple languages, and the councillors in those areas have fed in a number of languages that they would like people to be contacted in. I think there's about 14 or so languages. So we are just drafting up at the moment a letter and sort of note to kind of go out in a number of languages to really sort of make sure that people, by doing that, to make sure people are aware of our proposals and are aware of how it may affect them, and then looking at how they may be able to sort of, if they need additional support, to allow them to sort of understand the proposals and to feed back into the proposals. So that is underway at the moment. So I think in terms of the actual documentation, we've always made it clear through the consultation material that and to everybody that we can, if we have a request for for translation, then we'll look at accommodating that. We haven't had any specific requests about the documentation, so I think the key focus at the moment is to make sure that actually we have reached these people, and if they do have particular sort of needs and special arrangements required, that they're able to let us know about that. The final question there, particularly, I think Councillor Foley had raised a question really around about particular properties. I can confirm that the properties that were listed in the email are not identified for demolition in the current proposals that we are consulting on. There is one residential property in the Wilden area in Bedford, so this is outside of the area of Poets area in Bedford Station, that has been identified for potential demolition. That's actually not one of the ones that was on Councillor Foley's list, but we have been in contact with them directly through the landowner meeting. And then the other area which is identified particularly in the technical report is the Willow Cottage Cattery, which is not a residential premise, if you like, but it is obviously associated with that. I think I'm not sure if that is all the questions on property. Do you want to flick onto the next slide and just check and see if there was anything else? Yes, I think I'm probably handing back over to Will on freight.
You are. Thank you very much, Kirsty. So in terms of the plans for freight, if we move on to the next slide. So in terms of sort of this, the question is about freight capacity, and that it's likely to be limited by the small number of freight paths south of Cambridge. Is there any prospect of there being changes at that location that will increase the number of paths? So certainly we are not doing anything in that area, beyond, as I say, what's in the proposals at the moment for that will significantly increase the number of freight paths. So as I've always said here, whilst there is capacity on East West Rail, the challenge is getting to and from East West Rail, and that would require quite a significant amount of investment from government. And whether that will be made available or not really isn't a question for us. It's more for it is more for the department. But I think realistically, what we've said in the consultation document about a maximum of, sort of up to about one freight train path per hour, seems realistic in terms of the current infrastructure. And so, as I say, we're not really foreseeing, ourselves making those significant changes, and they're certainly not in any of the proposals that I have seen to date in terms of what government is considering. What we are doing is, having a conversation with government about what their long-term strategy might be, and we're putting various sort of scenarios to them, so that by the time we get to the statutory consultation, we're able to give a more definitive position. But that that is where we are at the moment in the process. So hopefully that helps. As I say, it is a matter for the department, but we are sort of testing various scenarios with them as we look at what freight potential demand might be. So if we move on to the next slide, again, some questions on our approach to consultation. If we flick onto the sort of next, will you extend the consultation to allow for face-to-face events? I think we have considered these requests. We don't see that it's right to extend to allow for face-to-face events. There is sort of clear sort of guidance for holding virtual consultations. A number of projects have held virtual consultations, and given the degree of uncertainty about when face-to-face events will come into would be possible, I think the thing to note is that we have worked quite carefully to meet the needs of the sort of guidance that's available on virtual consultation. Contacting 270,000 people, opening our virtual consultation rooms, which have already had more visitors than our face-to-face events did at the last consultation. Also, the amount of documentation that we've made available, the live chat events where people can talk direct to our experts, and the series of briefing events that we've been doing as well. So we do think we have provided a good amount of information, a good amount of opportunity for people to engage, and therefore, particularly in light of the uncertainties around the timing of face-to-face events, we're satisfied that we have been able to operate to run a good, transparent consultation, and therefore we will draw that consultation to a close on the 9th of June. In terms of how we'll analyse feedback from the consultation and rank the concepts, so every single piece of feedback that we receive will be read, and the insight from it will be organised by themes, so that we can then look at the themes more generally and take that information into account. And where it will particularly be helpful to us is, you'll be aware that we have 15 assessment factors that we use to consider the options that are in front of us and how we develop the scheme. And so we will use the consultation information to help us apply those 15 assessment factors to make sure we're taking into account all the information that can be available to us as a consequence of the insight that people have given us. So it really does help us shape our analysis of the options. In terms of when will you know which options have been selected or concepts have been selected? Well, by the time we get to statutory consultation, that will be within the next sort of 12 months. Then it's at that point that we will really be setting out pretty much a single preferred option for the entire of East West Rail. We will also set out options that we've considered but discounted, or if in very rare circumstances, if things are very close, we may take a couple of concepts still into the next round of into the statutory consultation. But we will do everything we can to provide people sort of greater clarity on what has been selected at that point, noting that we will continue to take into account new information, back check our decisions all the way through to the point at which we submit the DCO application. So the feedback that we get at statutory consultation will all still be taken into account, but we will try, as I say, to go as far as we can to set out the concepts that we are selecting, that we're likely to select at that point, so people can really engage with what the preferred option is. If we move on to the next slide, I think that draws to a conclusion the sort of thematic questions. As I say, there'll be plenty of opportunity in the next couple of, after I complete the next couple of slides, to ask direct questions and have a discussion in this forum today. So if you haven't had one of your questions answered or want to ask follow-ups, plenty of opportunity for that. But I did just want to sort of point out, the ways for people to get involved. So the virtual consultations rooms are open all the way through to the 9th of June. The live chat events, we've still got more of those live chat events coming, and we'll give you the dates for those on the next slide. We've got dedicated phone lines, lots of people actually phoning us and using that line, so that's very welcome. And then, of course, people can begin to feedback, or are beginning to feedback. Actually, we've had several thousand people already feeding back using the online form, and that's available through to the 9th of June as well. If we flick onto the next slide, I think, as I said, we've got a number of live chat sessions both over this week and next week, still 5 live chat sessions taking place in evenings, on weekends, as well as during the day. So a full range of live chat sessions there for people to engage in. And that's a good opportunity to ask direct questions to our experts. So do encourage people to participate in those. As we move on to the next slide, also just reminding people how they can actually respond to the consultation itself. So as I've mentioned before, feedback forms can be submitted online. They can also be submitted by emailing us, consultation@east-west-rail, or people can post them into us, and free post East West Rail. If people do have any questions, if they want a paper copy of the forms or documents, then either give us a call, number is there, or do drop us an email to our contact address. So I think from there, we'll move on to the next slide, which I think opens up the Q&A. So really, if we take the slides down now, open to the floor for people to raise their hand and ask us questions, and we'll go from there.
Colleen, please go ahead.
Hello. Yes. First of all, checking you can hear me okay?
Yes, Colleen, great, thanks.
Lovely. As you would expect, I've got a lot of questions to ask because I represent the Poets area where we've got so many houses under threat, and also the neighbouring properties which aren't directly affected with compulsory purchase or acquisition, but that will be affected if the 6-track go ahead. So my first question, and I've actually got a lot, but I know that you probably won't be able to take them all. My first question is that the council have submitted a consultant's report from SLC Rail, which is showing that a 4-track is possible to run, that there is sufficient availability within the lines to be able to do that, and also that with some track layout adjustments that the trains could run on 4-track, and therefore there wouldn't be the demolition required. So first of all, can I check that that has been received, and that what work is going on to look at that and to analyse it? And I sincerely hope that you will take that into account, and that actually would be your final decision, because one thing I'd like to know would be the costings between the 4-track and the 6-track, and also carrying on from that about all of the disruption that will be caused to the residents along that line, and what will be done to minimise that disruption. So I'll stop there on that first question. I know that others will want to come in with different questions, and I'm happy to take my turn, but I do have other questions as well.
Well, thank you very much, Colleen. I'll offer some answers, and then if Stephen wants to sort of jump in as well. So we do have a copy of the SLC report, and we're obviously grateful for Bedford Borough Council for preparing that. That obviously will be taken into account as we go through the consultation responses. So that is for sure. One of the things that we do need to consider, is not just looking at Bedford in isolation, but how the whole Oxford Cambridge sort of timetable and capacity works. And it looks to us like the SLC report is a little bit more focused on Bedford in isolation, but as you say, you know, that report is with us. We will take it into account. You know, we don't want to demolish any more houses than are absolutely necessary to deliver a workable scheme. So if there are ways, you know, we've said what we've put on the table is a reasonable worst case scenario. So where there are things that we can do that you know, that reduce the amount of demolition, and if there are things in the SLC report that we can take into account, then we absolutely will. What I do want to say is, as we take those things into account, I don't want people to suddenly be under the impression that, you know, this is a slam dunk, that the risk of demolition, you know, has gone away. You know, I think it would be wrong of me to suggest that, and we do want people to continue to engage with us, and you know, on all the detail, because that really is important. But we absolutely will take it into account, and if it does, you know, if there's insight in there that allows us to minimize the impact, then we absolutely will. Relating to disruption in the area, you know, of course, again, as we begin to look at the construction schedule and plan for the construction, you know, again, there's a very big focus on how do we do that in a way that minimizes disruption to local communities, both by when we do the work, how we do the work, how we phase the work, all of those things we will take into account. So, you know, we don't want to disrupt any more people for any longer than we absolutely have to. I don't know, Stephen, whether there's anything else you want to add, or whether that covers it.
I think you pretty much covered it there, Will. I think, yeah, the points on construction disruption, obviously, as the designs for the scheme develop, we have teams that are expert in construction. They will be looking at how best to deliver those elements of the infrastructure. Obviously, you know, working in a town centre, it is difficult. It presents a number of challenges. But again, you know, the teams that are looking at this are used to dealing with those challenges. They understand what those challenges are, and as Will said, we'll be looking to take every step we can to keep that disruption to a minimum.
Brilliant. Thank you both. We have Ben has a question. Next, we can then do kind of like a second round of questions afterwards.
Yeah. I thought, as Colleen had asked about related aspects, it was worth at the moment asking about you know, something to do with the possible track arrangements at Bedford Station. Yeah, looking at the technical document, you know, for example, at 85, 64 and 65, there's talk there about, you know, for East Midlands stopping trains to remain on the southbound fast line rather than crossing over to the slow line, there might need to be changes. And one of the possible solutions would involve reducing the speed limit for, you know, the fast line, but it doesn't actually say what that possible solution would be. And so I'm just hoping to get more detail there about what's being referred to.
Stephen, that is probably one for you. So I'll.
Yeah, I'm actually inclined to draw in my colleague Chris, who's on the call as well, to answer this one. Chris, are you available?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Failing miserably to switch on my camera. Apologies, guys. Yeah, it's really a Network Rail question, and it goes back to what Will said, that it's not just about the service from Oxford and Cambridge, but we would then be affecting the service from London up to, you know, the East Midlands up to Sheffield and Leicester. So we are working with Network Rail to look at the options around that. But really, as the guys have said, we're still working through, and we'll be looking at the report back from Bedford Borough Council and looking at those things together in the next stage of the design. But we can't really, until we do further design, we can't really answer much more questions on that, I don't think. Is that unhelpful, or does that answer anything there?
It's specifically saying one of the solutions. Why can't we know which one of the solutions it's referring to? There's only a limited number of possibilities.
So I'm going to attempt to answer that, but unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer that. I have to say, myself, I'm not as familiar with that section of the technical document as others. So without referring back to the document and reading through what it said, I'm afraid I can't give you a specific answer on that at the moment. But I think, you know, the point is in there that some of the options do have an impact on the rest of the rail network. They do impact the ability of other services to call at Bedford. They impact on the speed at which some of the non-stop services pass through, and therefore the impact has relatively wide-reaching consequences and would be unacceptable unacceptable to the rest of the rail industry in terms of the impact it would have on those other services.
I think, Ben, probably the thing to say is that if we're not able to answer your detailed question, with the team that we've got on online tonight, then we can certainly take that offline and get you an answer. So if there is, I think Geordie can probably be in touch to make sure he's got your question down, and then we'll make sure we get you an answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I wasn't able to ask that one in advance.
Right, thank you. So we look at it and we'll try to provide a response in writing. Thanks for that. I can see that Colleen has her hand up again. Colleen, please.
Thank you. I see that my colleague Louise Jackson has managed to join us. I think she was in a previous meeting, so has only just managed to join. And can I just let her know that I have asked a question about the 4-track and also mitigation against disruption. My next question, though, is about the need to sell scheme, which there's a lot of concern about that, because we think that it should be immediate now, because the homes are blighted now, that obviously nobody is wanting to buy homes at the moment when they know that this is there's a possibility of this in the pipeline. I know that you mentioned earlier about the that there are rented properties, and also the owners obviously don't live in them, and that the scheme should be made available for them as well. And also to make sure that as well about the compensation scheme, that that as work or as things carry on, that it isn't just the affected properties that have had the letters already. It is wider than that, because there is concern within the area. And that brings me on to the letters that you mentioned earlier. And I do have to thank the team for the meetings that you've had with Louise and myself, and that you are going to be sending out some more letters. Can I just have a bit of clarification? Because I think you were hoping to send them out round about today. Could you let me know when they're going out and when you might expect them? So, you know, and I know that Louise and I, we have appreciated the fact that you have been talking with us and taking some of our ideas.
Yeah, so we're I was hoping to kind of get them out today. We've got the translation for I think it was 3 or 4 languages that you'd sort of put forward. So, but we're just getting the translation for Councillor Foley, because I think that the sensible thing to do would be just to sort of have a wider translation that just covered those areas in Bedford kind of more generally. and that can then go out, and we're also looking at sending something out to the residents as well, so actually occupiers, as you say, so that they have a chance to make sure that everybody is aware of our proposals and how potentially they might affect them. Forgive me, because you might need to remind me of some of the, to prompt me if I don't answer all your questions, sort of thing, because there was a number of parts to it. I think you were initially asking about the need to sell. So again, we would I'm very sorry, I just need to carry on with the question. We would encourage anybody really to sort of feed in on through the consultation, basically, how, you know, whether the need to sell scheme addresses their particular circumstances or it doesn't. I do recognise that with the Bedford area, and obviously houses being identified for demolition currently under our proposals, that's a key concern for people in the area. And if people have that pressing need to sell early, we do encourage them to get in touch with us, even though we are undergoing a consultation on the scheme. So as well as feeding in their particular responses to the consultation, we would strongly recommend that they write to us or contact us or through the landowner meetings, basically, to sort of alert us to the circumstances that they may have kind of currently, and then we can look to see if there's any sort of support that we can give through that. The other point I think you raised probably was about really that these schemes are obviously for landowners, or for, particularly for the need to sell, it be for owner occupiers or others that would be sort of eligible. So again, the eligibility of the scheme is set out in the consultation, and again, I would encourage those that feel that it doesn't meet their particular circumstances, and their particular concerns, to either feed that in through responding more generally to the consultation, to contact us, or by feeding in particularly to the need to sell consultation. Is that, Colleen, has that answered the questions you asked, or is there, remind me if there's anything I've missed?
I think that was covering what I asked, but knowing Louise, that if I've missed anything out, she'll pick it up and ask you.
Okay.
Yeah, so Louise, please, if you have a question.
Well, it does relate to the need to sell scheme, and possibly a point as much as a question. And I'm sorry that I can't show my face, and I'm also using a device that I wouldn't normally use to log into this, because I'm having terrible problems with technology this evening that have made things incredibly difficult. I think there is an awful lot of disquiet around the need to sell scheme. There's a general feeling that it isn't adequate, and that it's not as easy to access the information as it perhaps ought to be as well. So I would ask you to think about that. I did make the point in the very first meeting that we had with yourselves that the impact was at the very point that those letters landed on people's doormats, and that that impact is being felt now. And I think there are far too many hoops that people are going to need to jump through in order to access that. So I think it's really important that you look at that again. And I know that you want people to respond to the consultation, and I do agree that people should do that. But also there is something about building goodwill here amongst the people that you're going to need to be dealing with further down the line. So I think some more work needs to happen now, really, on that. I hope that's yeah.
Okay, I mean, I guess following on from our kind of sort of call earlier on, I mean, we are encouraging people to sort of feed in, obviously, through the kind of consultation. That's a good means. It's a good sort of formal means. But really, all they need to do is email us or call us through really either the land sort of number kind of thing, or the general kind of contact, and just let us know what information they want, and let us know maybe their particular concerns and their particular circumstance, and we would very much like to start those discussions with us if they haven't already done so.
Thank you.
If you do have any other suggestions, Louise or Colleen or Councillor Foley, do let us know.
Brilliant, thanks, Kirsty, and back to Colleen, if you want to add or raise another question.
It is about communication, and quite understandably, and I know that you'll understand it as well, that these residents are living under extreme stress and anxiety, and they need to, after the consultation finishes, they're still going to have that stress right the way through. So what communications will be going on between the time that the consultation closes on the 9th of June and when the scheme is announced the next stage? I think that people want to keep being involved and want to have information. So will anything like that be happening, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good point, and I think it's one of the things that I suggest maybe that we pick up with you and sort of others to really look at a plan around that and how we can kind of keep communication going so people kind of understand what's coming next and sort of time scales.
Thank you. I know that other letters are, a clarification. Are these second letters going out to everybody again, or are they just going out to those that haven't responded?
That haven't responded, so those that are already in contact with us, we've had a meeting and potentially there's follow-ups kind of going on after that anyway, that there's contact being made there. The other aspect of that, as we've covered, really is just writing more generally as well to residents in the area to make sure that they are aware, because they may not be picked up by the landowner meetings or the landowner letters.
Thank you. I've got one more question. I might have another, but I've got one at the minute. And this is about the route. That this is route E, and there is a lot of campaigning about a southern route. Are you able to say at the moment whether the southern route would be considered, or is route E the route? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I'm happy to pick that one up, Colleen. So we set out the reasons why route E was our preferred route option back in January 2020. The analysis that we've done since then hasn't changed our view on that. So route E remains, our preference. And now we obviously have the alignments that we've developed within route E. And that's what is being consulted on right now. Now, we will obviously get feedback through the process of consultation, and we will also continue to do our own sort of studies and development work as well. If we were to hear something through the consultation or in that development work that made us sort of revisit route E through the back-checking process, then we would do that. But to date, we haven't seen anything that's led us to do that. But obviously, we are yet to go through all the consultation responses that we've received, and we'll do that in a proper and methodical way. So, through to the point of starting the consultation, our conclusions remain that route E was the right one. We'll obviously take into account consultation feedback and our further studies, but as I say, through to the point of the launch of consultation, there wasn't anything that we've heard or seen that has led us to revisit our decision on route E.
Thank you for that. As you know, and we've said all along that we do support route E, we think that is the best route. But of course, you'll understand the dilemma that Louise and I are under because of the threat to so many homes and the complete change to the area. which I think, as I've said before, both myself and Ben, we live in the Poets area. It will affect us. It doesn't affect our particular homes, but it will affect us as residents. But yeah, I think that we've always said to you that Route E does make sense. It does look the better option. It does give the north, south, east, west connection for Bedford Station being in the Midland Centre. So I see that Ben and Louise have got questions as well.
Colleen, Ben.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on things Kirsty's been saying. But first of all, thanks for the clarity that all residents will be written to, and also that they will have contact in the range of languages. That definitely does help. However, I was concerned when you started talking about them. A couple of times you referred to them with the phrase short-term renters. I'm aware of and in touch with people living in properties threatened with demolition that were hoping to live in them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Sorry, you're completely correct. Yes, yes, they don't hold a long-term tenancy, but yes, I can understand. Yes, there are people that maybe be under that circumstance, but do view it as their long-term home. Absolutely.
Thanks, Kirsty. Louise.
Hi, thank you. And technology is defeating me again, and I really hope that I'm going to be able to continue to speak on this. I mean, this may have been discussed at some length before I was able to get on, and Colleen has alluded to it now. Obviously, our preference is very strongly for a 4-track solution to this, and we were incredibly surprised and disappointed when the 6-track proposals came forward. And I think there's a great deal of hurt and confusion in the area around this. I think it's not so much a question as a plea really for you to reconsider the 6-track proposal and take into consideration the immense disruption to a community. We do support the route. We do want to see these connections, but it's very difficult to envisage those losses as you propose there. And it's really, really important that we have some very good boundary treatment, whatever the outcome of the consultation, and that there is better communication going forward, because there's been so much disruption throughout the electrification process, and so much noise that residents have had to endure, and piling late into the night. And I think that they were already at the end of their tethers, so this has really been the final straw, and this is why that there is so much upset as well. So I think that's really the point I'm going to make, because I'm afraid I don't know what's made before, what points have been made before I was able to finally solve my problems and get online here. But I hope all of that will be taken into consideration, and that people will be encouraged to come forward and participate as well in the consultation and make those points.
Louise, thanks for that. Look, we don't want to demolish any more houses than we absolutely have to. Our analysis so far has pointed towards a 6-track solution being necessary, but we have received the SLC report from Bedford Borough Council. We will look at that in detail. We will do our own analysis as well. As I say, we've put out there a reasonable worst case scenario. We will do everything we can to minimize the demolitions and to minimize the disruption that building the railway will cause. right now, we are all we can do is encourage people to respond to us, give us their feedback, and we will take it into account.
Can I just come back on that, Will? I think I'm speaking to Will. I can't see everything on this screen, but it's a voice I recognise. I think the term reasonable worst case scenario is I'm not sure if it's well understood, and I'm not sure that everybody really understands that either, that you may not require as much land as you're saying. So I think it's really important to make that very, very clear to people as well. I may have that wrong, but I think that that's a possibility as well. So maybe there is more work that needs to be done to explain that to people fully. And I don't know what it's looking like in terms of engagement with individuals who are in the affected properties, but it certainly wasn't looking great before. I'm glad that the letter's going out in the different languages to encourage people to come forward, but I hope if that doesn't succeed, you'll try knocking on doors. It's very difficult at the moment, but that may be the only way forward.
As I say, Louise, we will continue to do everything we can to keep people engaged. And as I think Kirsty and Colleen were discussing earlier on, we do want continuing engagement beyond the consultation as well, because we do recognise this is an ongoing area of concern, interest, relationship that we need to build. So yeah, no, we absolutely do take that point, and we have been trying to communicate that this is a reasonable worst case scenario, but we will certainly sort of redouble our efforts on that.
Colleen, I can see that you raise your hand again.
Thank you. I am coming towards the end of my questions. I did warn you. It's about costings, and if we are asking for the costings, say the difference between the 4-track and the 6-track, who do we ask that question of? And can you? Well, obviously you can't give the answer now, but we really would like to see the difference in costings of that and other aspects of the scheme. So who would we be contacting about that, please?
So I think, Colleen, if you write to our contact at address, that will get picked up in terms of that information. I think there is some information in the technical report on the differences, but we can, if you write to us, we'll release all the information that we can to set that out.
Sorry, that technical report, it's fantastic bedtime reading, and we've read it a lot. But I think, sorry, my question was more about the difference between what SLC are suggesting and your current one for demolition, etc., for the 6-track. I know that I think we mentioned it at one of our meetings, but just to let you know that Louise and we are having a dreadful time, that the residents, there's a lot of feeling of distrust, that there's information not being given by yourselves, by ourselves, etc., etc., and we are really feeling it. I'm not expecting an answer to that, but just to let you know that we're having a pretty tough time because of the threat of demolition, etc. And we would really like as much information as possible and as quickly as possible about what the future holds. And we just can't stress enough to you about please, please, please do everything you can to get it as a 4-track.
We'll do everything that we can in terms of making sure you've got the information you need, and anything that we can do to sort of help build trust, and we're trying to be as transparent as we can and be straightforward and give people the opportunity to talk to us and get information. In terms of your representations on being 4-track over 6-track, we have heard them loud and clear. We will look at it as we continue to develop it, and as I say, we will do everything we can to minimise the amount of demolitions that we have to do.
Thank you.
And Ben.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on one of the aspects there to do with the disruption. It was mentioned, we've already been through an extended period of disruption because of electrification. And one of the particular aspects of that, which affected a wider range of people in Bedford, was the fact that Bromham Road and the bridge there was closed for a long time to be completely rebuilt. And there will be a lot of people throughout Bedford that will be particularly horrified with the prospect of it being closed for an extended period again for work, within a few years, which perhaps could have been anticipated by people within Great Minster House.
Look, we will obviously do what we can to keep disruption to a minimum. We do recognise that Bromham Road Bridge is a particularly challenging area. I think part of the challenge here is that these schemes, sort of have developed at different times and at different speeds. So I'm not entirely sure it was foreseeable. However, certainly I think from the process last time on Bromham Road Bridge, there are probably some things we can learn to minimise disruption going forward.
Great, thanks, Will. Louise.
Sorry, I'm moving around my house to try and find a signal. It really is that bad in here at the moment. I'm trying to do this all off of 4G. Sorry, I think that may have been a legacy hand, but I agree with everything that Councillor Foley has just said about all of the disruption on Bromham Road Bridge. It really was incredibly difficult for everybody, all the way up, all around the town, really. So it's really essential that all of that disruption that could be experienced is minimised going forward.
No point taken.
Brilliant. I can see that Colleen and Ben have raised their hands again. Colleen.
Yeah, this one isn't about the Poets area. It was more just a comment about the St John's station and the moving of it. And I think that the general feeling at the moment is that the one nearer to the hospital is a better option. So that was just a comment. It wasn't a question.
Thank you for that, Colleen.
Yeah. I was also moving more broadly, and sort of looking through the documents, I see time and time again, whether it's the concept 1 or concept 2 for the Marston Vale line. The plan is for there to be 4 trains per hour for both Woburn Sands and Ridgemont. The stats are that both Stuart B and Bedford St John's are better used stations. I was hoping to have some information on why that preference for Woburn Sands and Ridgemont.
So in part it's to do with the sort of economic modelling that suggests a sort of greater transport user benefits in some places rather than others. But it is a representation that we are hearing, and people raising questions about, would Stuart B be a better location? It is one of the reasons, we have looked at, can we expand where East West Rail calls in terms of you know, sort of beyond just Woburn Sands and Ridgemont. That's why in concept 2 you do have 2 trains per hour at Stuartby. But we have heard those representations, and we will, as we take the concepts forward, have a look at that in terms of the calling pattern.
Brilliant. Conscious of the time, I suppose we can do kind of like final questions. Colleen.
Thank you. I knew that there was a question to my reference to the St John's Fund. It's that I think that even with the hospital end one, that it's near some properties, and I was just checking that you have been in touch with ward councillors about it, or have they been in touch with you and raised the concerns that I think it's going to be quite near some properties.
I think in that particular area, so we have had some of the sort of local residents contacting us. I mean, they're not actually, it is probably more adjacent properties rather than actually any properties being directly affected by our proposals in that area. So we have been sort of responding back to people to kind of let them know the search areas that we're looking in. I guess from Jordy's perspective, Jordy can confirm, we've been having these these meetings with everybody really sort of concerned. I think that would be covered.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Geordie. I was asking that question because I know that the ward councillors, at least one of them, is at an actual council meeting tonight, so can't attend this particular one.
Yeah, no. On that point of contact, so we have basically been in touch with all the parishes, all the councillors within the consultation zone from Oxford to Cambridge. So definitely we've been in touch with those councillors as well. Because tonight they couldn't join this session, we as Will has previously mentioned, we have different channels that they can use to kind of like raise any questions that they might have, and also kind of like to reiterate that the recording of tonight's session and the slides will be available on the website next week, in case they want to look at those in their own time as well.
Can I just ask that is the viaduct going to be mentioned at the next meeting, which would be the Clapham Green meeting, whenever that is? We haven't been notified of that because I'm not a ward councillor of that particular area.
So we will, as we head north, we will sort of walk through the infrastructure interventions, in terms of what is likely to be necessary, so we can pick that up at the next session.
Can I have an invite to that, please, because it is actually in our ward?
Yeah, sure.
Please.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. We'll take that away and share the link with you. Just for information, that session is tomorrow afternoon at 5.
Well, I think there is a problem with the way that these meetings even are being communicated, and I think we need obviously there is an impact for Colleen and myself there, and I didn't know that, and quite possibly will not be able to attend anything tomorrow afternoon. So
no, because we've got a meeting at 5:30. Do your presentation first. Yeah.
If there are specific questions that you want to either ask now or that we can take away and get answered for you to save you joining that that event, then we can certainly do that.
I think I'll have to go away and have a think about that and come and speak to you, Will.
That's not fun.
And perhaps we can have a further meeting to discuss some of that, because tomorrow's not going to work for either of us, I think.
We can certainly pick that up.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, I'm conscious that we've hit the the mark on the time, I suppose. If there are no more questions, let's kind of wrap up the session. If we could have the slides back on, just as a reminder of what's to come. And Will, I suppose you can take it away.
In terms of what's coming next, it really now is, you know, the ongoing live chat events. We'll obviously pick up the point that you've made, Louise, about having a session to talk about the sort of viaduct piece as we head further north. You can just see the live chat sessions there as well. We've obviously been working together on the letter in multiple languages and making sure that that goes out to those concerned. And as we've said, both for the remainder of the consultation and beyond, making sure that we establish and maintain and establish good constructive engagement. And I know Kirsty and the team will be talking to you as ward councillors about how we can continue to do that. So I think that probably covers all the sort of material that we wanted to cover. You do please stay in touch. So if you have any sort of further questions, you know, Colleen, I know you were talking about the costs, so you do use that email address on the screen now. We picked up, I think, an earlier question from you, Ben, that Geordie will sort of make sure you get a response to as well. So definitely keen to maintain a sort of constructive and positive dialogue, recognizing, you know, I think for all of you on the call, that it is, you know, this is, you know, that we're grappling with some very sort of challenging issues that do have real impacts on people's lives, and we really don't underestimate that. And we want to do everything we can to make sure people have got information and are engaged and are treated with the respect that they deserve.
Sorry, just to because there's been a couple of questions on the recording, so just to reiterate, the recordings of the session tonight, as well as the slides presented, will be made available on the consultation site next week, and as well as all the other recordings and decks from all the other sessions that we're holding throughout the week, in case you want to check, for example, those of tomorrow with the parishes and councillors the north of Bedford as well.
Thank you. Can I just say thank you for the opportunity this evening, because it has been useful. I've heard quite a few of the answers before on the webinars, and that's why I've not said anything about electrification, etc. But it's good to talk, and it's good to hear some of your views and to have got the answers to our questions. And I know that you know just how we are feeling with this horrendous threat hanging over us. And if we're feeling like that, goodness knows what the residents are actually feeling.
No, I do understand your point, Colleen, and that's why, as I said before, we do want to do everything we can to, you know, to help navigate through what are some very challenging and stressful issues for people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Cheers.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.